Welcome into the show. Thanks for tuning in this Thursday morning, June the 13th. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. West Coast wake-up call in all time zones in between and around the world. Coming up in just a few minutes, we have Yael Averbuch-West joining us. Really excited to talk to her. And it's been a great week so far. A lot of great feedback from the lineup, and we are really excited to have been able to put this together, opening up the World Cup in France this summer with this lineup. Has been a real pleasure, and we've really enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well. And the feedback in the comments has been really positive, so we think you're enjoying it also. So. Look, this morning, as we kind of, looked through the last 48 hours of the Women's World Cup, you really had two things going on. The first, there's been still an uproar over the fact that the U.S. women's national team scored 13 goals, and now it's kind of morphed into this controversy about the fact that they were celebrating and having such a good time at 13 goals. And I get it. You can go either way in terms of, do you think they should be celebrating? Should they not be celebrating? And now we put in parameters. If it's your first World Cup goal, then it's okay. You can celebrate, but, you have to have some respect for your opponent, and then blah, 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 all this stuff. I mean, the idea that you scored 13 goals, you're setting all kinds of records, you're having fun. I don't know. I don't see the big controversy here. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. I do think that there's a very real chance that the U.S. scored more goals in that one game than they may score combined for the rest of the tournament. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm saying that that's much more likely than them scoring 13 goals. And then yesterday, you have France who comes out and has a really, really tight game, close game with Norway, and wins 2-1. And, now everybody's like, well, I mean, France looked really good in the first game, and U.S. scored 13 in theirs. And you have to look at the opponents. You have to look at, the teams in the matchups as they come. And, I don't sit here and watch these matches and think, oh, the U.S. women's national team are just going to breeze to a repeat. Nor do I think that, France is in trouble because they had a 2-1 match. I mean, I think the U.S. is going to definitely get out of their group. It would be massively a shock if they didn't get out of their group, and so I think that's going to happen. But I think against Chile, I think Chile's going to want to try to possess the ball, and for all the talent that we have tactically, we don't exploit that talent enough, and therefore we do provide teams with the opportunity to possess the ball. The last time U.S. played against France, they struggled, they lost. When they played against Spain, they struggled. It took individual performance to get us to a victory. And I think Chile's going to try to possess the ball, and Sweden always plays us tough. And so I think this idea that, we're getting a little bit of, out of whack on both sides, right? That the 13-0, this is the 92 Dream Team and no one's going to be able to touch them kind of mentality. I think there's a little bit of out there, and then I think there's some on the other side who are just completely like, these women are disrespectful to the game and blah blah blah. And I just think we're somewhere in the middle. I think we're somewhere in the middle. I don't think the women's national team in any way, shape, form, or fashion were across the line. Is it something maybe I would have done at 13? Probably not to that level, but I mean, you're in a World Cup and you're scoring and you're having a good time. I didn't see, any taunting as I would define it. And so, I mean, look, to each his own in that. You do whatever whatever you want, whatever you feel comfortable with in that moment. In terms of, thinking though that result is indicative of the rest of the tournament, I think that is a very naive take. Thailand are just not a very good team, and for all of the strengths of the U.S. women's national team, the Thailand women's national team is weak in those areas. It was really a perfect storm. Or in the case of Thailand, the absolute worst opponent that they could face. And so it's an opponent that can outpace them, that can outjump them, and it was tactically a bad setup for Thailand as well. Like they tactically just didn't approach the game very well, on top of the fact that they had the bigger, faster, stronger hill to climb against this U.S. women's national team. Like, I just think it was a struggle all the way around for Thailand, and seeing that 13-0 score is indicative of that. Actually, I actually thought at halftime, when the U.S. women's national team were up 3-0 watching the match, I felt like the U.S. were underperforming at 3-0. Like, that's how bad the matchup was. And then obviously in the second half they turned it on, and especially as the Thailand began to tire, then it was all she wrote, and the U.S. women's national team just blew through them, and 13-0. And you contrast that with yesterday's France-Norway match, 2-1. It was a battle end to end. I mean, even watching Nigeria and Korea, South Korea, that was a match where they had chance after chance after chance. They get an own goal. Nigeria's up 1-0, and then is able to, on a great counterattack, open up and get that second goal. And then after that, it was all she wrote. There was really no way back at that point. But it was a much closer match than the 2-0 score, and could have gone either way. There were lots of chances there. And so in all of these matches, it's been pretty close. And I think that the outlier, the anomaly of the U.S. women's national team match against Thailand is specific to those two teams. I don't believe that there is that disparity across this tournament. I just think that you have the number one seed in the tournament, number one ranked in the world, facing an opponent that was absolutely the worst matchup you could put in terms of an opponent for the U.S. women's national team, in terms of them having a chance. And that is what we saw. And I think it's going to be a much tougher battle for the U.S. women's national team going forward from where they are today. But, it is what it is. You play the games that are in front of you, and you do what you can. And, I certainly think the U.S. women's national team are going to keep coming for more. And it'll be interesting to see how these next few matches play out, and then line up for the knockout rounds in terms of the opponents and who's matched up where, and in all of that. We'll see. We'll see where the pathway is. We'll see who is destined to meet in what round, and that kind of thing. And if all of those things play out, I think at some point we're probably staring at a U.S. versus France match. And although France has not, put up a 13 on the board, I think you have to set that aside, the U.S.-Thailand match, and you have to really look at what comes after that. And looking at round 2 and round 3 of the group stages, see how the U.S. women look in those matches, and then you start to get a better feel. And then knowing the history between the U.S. and France, I think it's going to be a challenge for the U.S. women to get past France. And not to say that they can't do it. at all. I'm just saying I think it's going to be a challenge. I think that these tests are going to get tougher. So, there were players that scored their first ever World Cup goals who were ecstatic, and it's going to be a moment they get to celebrate for the rest of their lives. And we'll see if they get a chance to score again in the future, in the tournament, as these games get tougher. But looking at the landscape of women's soccer, the quality of play from quite a few of these teams is really, like, from a tactical sense, is really good. I mean, really good. Like, the Dutch team looks really good tactically. The Spanish team, I know they had a hard luck loss yesterday to Germany, 1-0. Could have easily scored multiple times. It was just didn't get it in the back of the net, but were really close, played really well. In terms of the quality of play, were, to me, much better than the German national team. And it's why I keep saying that if you look at the Spanish women's national team and you don't see the future, you're blind. The Spanish women's national team program is on the rise, and I think over the next 10 years they are going to be dominating as they get better players coming through their tactical system, and that emphasis and priority is placed from a federation level on these programs, like the U.S. women's national team has been getting more priority than the rest of the world. Are they equal to the men's national team in the U.S.? No. But in Spain, they're starting to put priority there. We're going to see that with the Spanish national team and see them start to rise even beyond what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now is impressive. It's really a shame that they didn't at least get a point out of yesterday's match, because they're playing really well. They're having a few mistakes here and there. I would say they're more individual mistakes than tactical errors and lack of execution from an individual standpoint. And when you get into that, it hurts the team, and it's definitely hurt them. And but 3 good matches yesterday. Today, we have some more matches in this Women's World Cup coming up at noon Eastern. Australia and Brazil. And at 3 Eastern, we have South Africa and China. And so, two more fixtures to take in today as this Women's World Cup continues on and is continuing to build and build towards a final. It's been some really good stuff, and excited to see where this goes and to see how these next few matches for the U.S. women's national team shape up. Will be an interesting story as well. The sponsor of this half hour is Dutkick brand. If you have not gotten your planner at Dutkick brand, it's a soccer planner. DUTKIG brand.com. Again, that is DUTKIG brand.com. Go there, take a look around, find you some stuff as you get ready for this next season in kicking off in July or August, or maybe you're right now in the middle of a national tournament and you need something to chart out your plays for your team. Whatever the case, go to dutkickbrand.com. Use the promo code DWSHOW when you place an order, and you'll get 10% off, and you'll support the show at the same time. So it's a twofer right there, and helps you and it helps us. So like to thank Dutkick Brand for being a sponsor on the show, and you can learn more about them at dutkickbrand.com. We will be right back after this with Yael Averbush West. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in this Thursday morning, June the 13th. We are really pleased to be joined by Yael Averbush West. Yael, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you. Happy to be on the show.
So give us a little bit of I always like to get a little bit of the background in this love affair with the game and the origin story for our guest. Where did this love affair with the game of soccer start for you?
Yeah, so I initially started playing just because my friend in first and second grade played soccer. My parents are lifelong athletes but never played the game. So it was kind of new to us. Very new to us. We had no idea what the heck we were doing. But I think, my personality is kind of one of those people who, no matter what I do, I get very single-minded and focused on it. So pretty quickly, I remember being all about soccer. I no longer wanted to do anything else. And I became very serious. So, growing up in North Jersey, I was really fortunate to have wonderful coaches and mentors and a really rich soccer culture with people living here from all around the world who understood the sport and were watching games that weren't even offered on TV here in the U.S. at the time, and just knew so much about the game and what it would take if I was serious about soccer to kind of pursue that vision and that dream. So I had so many great people showing me things like, oh no, you gotta watch soccer going on in Europe and watch these teams, watch Arsenal, watch whoever. And I hadn't heard of any of this. And then they were showing me things to practice on my own. And so I was hooked. I mean, by the time I was 11, I think I was totally obsessed with soccer.
So you're obsessed with soccer. You keep playing. What was your youth path? What was that like specifically? Was it a travel club type of environment that you were playing in at, say, 9, 10, 11, or were you playing more locally and then later did some club? What was that like for you in terms of a player development pathway?
Yeah, so the way it worked in North Jersey at the time I was kind of coming up through the system was that after my first, I think I played 2 seasons, so kind of a year of rec soccer, and then I tried out for what was called the travel team, and that was kind of like the local, most elite level. And, the way I was, because I was so into this, and I was at that time even practicing and watching the game outside of, our 2 times a week team sessions and our game on the weekend, I was just progressing so much faster than the other girls in my age group. So what happened was I was nervous to try out for the travel team. I made it. I felt really lucky. But then I quickly outgrew that level and it was just not challenging anymore. So then I played up an age group with the local girls travel team. And similarly, at first it was very difficult because they were a lot bigger and stronger and faster than me. But I kind of then again caught up to the level, and it was once again not so much of a challenge by the end of the season. So I actually, had this, then we had a family debate kind of, do we start driving really far? I mean, I was still 11 years old, 12 years old. Do we start driving an hour to, a more elite club? Or then there was also this boys team in my local town, Montclair, New Jersey. And I was really fortunate to have, my first coach who I grew up playing with was coaching the team. So it was kind of a little bit of a safe environment. So I actually was the only girl on that boys team for a couple of years. So I stayed local for a lot longer than other players did. Actually my entire youth development prior to going to college, I played for local clubs, and I opted to play for, a club that was a 20-minute drive from me, in high school, rather than driving down to what at the time was the most elite club, which is PDA in New Jersey. So I kind of took a little bit of a different path in that sense and found some really wonderful local coaches who just continued to foster my love of the game and set up amazing development environments for me. It was a little bit different though than playing with just the top girls in my age group. I was playing with older girls. I was playing with guys all the time. And then, did what was very traditional at the time was to also, in addition to club, try out for ODP. So I took the ODP route as well. So tried out, made the state team, then went on to the regional pool and regional team and played in the interregional events to be seen by national coaches. So in some ways, my soccer player pathway was pretty non-traditional. I was one of the first people not to play for my high school team, and it was very controversial. And like I said, I kind of played with older girls and boys very often. But then in some senses, I did take a very traditional route in terms of at the first age group I tried out for ODP. I went through that system, ended up playing college soccer at the University of North Carolina. And then following that, I was really fortunate because there was no women's professional league at the time. But following that, WPS, the former professional league, had just started up. So I was able to go straight into a professional career in our country. So in a lot of ways, like I said, I had an untraditional path and upbringing, but then also in some ways it was very traditional.
I love that, and I love the fact that every player has a different story, a different pathway, or something that some road that they took. I think oftentimes we look at player development as one linear path. Well, you should do this, and then you should go play this, and then this leads to this, and for each player, the story's a little bit different. I mean, if you grow up in Brazil, it may be, playing in the streets of the favelas, and it's a totally different experience. Maybe you're not even playing, full 11-a-side soccer until you're a teenager, in some cases. And in other cases, you may be, playing on a full-size pitch when you're 7. So there's all these different pathways and experiences, and I love, hearing those, and then in kind of diving down each of those roads and why certain things appeal to you. What did you, as a girl coming up in northern Jersey, looking for that extra challenging environment, what was it like playing with all the boys? Did it toughen you up? Did you feel like, oh, this is a breeze? What was that experience like specifically?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was my first experience really going outside of my comfort zone, which became kind of, I think all elite players will talk about the different ways that they went outside their comfort zone throughout their career and do it all the time. So it was the beginning of what became a very familiar feeling in my life, but it was really tough. I mean, socially, it was very uncomfortable and awkward because we're talking about, these were middle school type years, so early teenagers. So it was very an interesting dynamic there. But then also just, I mean, at my very best, I was going to be an average player on the team. So I was all of a sudden playing with players where I saw, wow, the bar is so far above where I am. And they were able to do things that, I could never do on the field. And so I played very quickly, 1 and 2 touch. I was a forward at the time. So if I could get off a quick shot, I did score some goals, but I was definitely not a starter in the team. And the team didn't need me. I would say, like, I needed the team. So it was a very, it brought me down to earth. And it would be easy, I think. And what happens today, often I see, is that you have a really elite level female player. And if you just play on your same age group team under the same coach for your entire youth development, you are always the star. And I absolutely did not feel that I was ever a star in my youth life coming up. I knew I was really serious and dedicated, and I knew I wanted to be a star, but I never felt like that, especially not on that boys team. So yeah, I think that was the big thing for me, was that it made me realize that the bar was so much higher than where it was, what my view of it was when I played with the girls my age, which was an amazing thing soccer-wise. But I think also, while it made me very mentally tough, it has been an ongoing struggle for me, up to this day in my career, to be able to play in a level that's, appropriate level for me, and to be able to impact the game. Because really what I learned throughout a lot of my youth development was I could hang with really good players. And I still feel that way. I could jump into a pickup game with very elite male players and I can hang. I could play 1-2 touch, play quickly, stay in the rhythm of the game. But the challenge for me has always been, and I think it kind of started around this time, is can I step into my own level game with girls my age or appropriate level and be an impact player. And that transition for me was really difficult. And it took me a lot of years, and it's still something, I struggle with all the time.
Can you define that? What you mean by struggle in your own, like going from, say, that boys environment to, the age appropriate girls environment, and that kind of shining or stepping up or what have you? What do you mean that was a little bit of a struggle?
Yeah. So, for example, like I was saying, I learned to play very quickly, 1 and 2 touch. Like, I would never linger on the ball. I was not the one who was going to carry the ball for the team. I would never try to use speed or strength or aggression against the boys. I found other ways to do it. I would have to think quickly and kind of almost avoid those physical confrontations because I knew I was outmatched. So what I developed in some sense was, like, I developed a lot of skills that are hugely important in the game that help me to attain, live my dreams and play at the highest level. But I also really shied away from developing certain skills that are necessary to be an impact player on the team. And by impact player, I mean, I'm thinking of some of the evaluations I would get from coaches when I was starting to make this transition back through my high school years and even up through, going through college. It was always, and this was a big one. Can you impart yourself on the game? Can you dominate? These are all the words that I would always say. Okay, so you have really good technical skills, good game understanding, but can you use those to dominate the game? Can you impact the game more? Can you, I think this was a big one. Impose yourself on the game. So I was kind of a very passive player in some senses because I was used to, like I said, hanging and trying to just fit in rather than being the one to take the attention, to take it upon myself, to carry the ball, to dribble, to try things. Though that was very outside of my comfort zone. Whereas most of, the girls growing up and being the elite player in their environments immediately learned those skills. If their team was going to win, it was because they were going to score a goal or two and have an assist. And I was never focused on helping my team to win. I was focused on not making my team lose, basically, which is not, now that I look back, not an ideal mindset. But at the same time, I'm very thankful for the skills I did learn there. So I think those evaluations at the time, and they stuck in my head. I can literally remember the wording of them having to do with dominate, impact, those kind of things were really what I struggled with. Like I had the skill set and the tools, but I wasn't really able to use them properly to be dominant in the women's game.
I think too often that the mind is the area of the American soccer development pathway and experience that is addressed the least. Oftentimes we're looking, we look at skill and we look at, speed and we look at size and we look at some of those things. But what I'm referring to, I guess, with the mind is that kind of thought process, even some emotion that plays into it, like that you're describing, this idea that, I don't want to lose the game for my team. So I'm going to do X and Y. Yes, I'm developing skills. Yes, I'm processing the game faster, whatever, but it's also a self-protective measure. And having our coaches that are developing and working with teams, I guess almost take on the role of a psychologist at times, a sports psychologist, to be able to say, that's good. What you're doing is good, but can you do X? Can you do this? Can you and also develop or challenge in those environments our players to take risk and to encourage, this challenge that maybe you don't succeed at first, but it in the end will make you a better player. I do think that's an area that we need to get better as a whole in terms of our player development and in improving that. So you go to play in college, and I grew up as a Duke basketball fan. So you went to the school down the road that you can name. I will leave it out.
This is where I hang up on you.
Right. Just a little Duke story. I had never visited the campus growing up. I didn't grow up anywhere near North Carolina, and but my parents knew how much I loved Duke. We had no connection to the school. Just randomly picked them in a tournament, March Madness tournament, when I was like 10 years old. Didn't know who they were. It was like one of those when you turn on the tournament and you just pick a team, like I'm going to root for them in this game kind of thing. And they won that game, and they kept winning. They got all the way to the Final Four. It was in 1990. They got all the way to the Final Four and got just smashed by UNLV by like 30 points. But that was it. That was my team. And I was like, Dad, that's my favorite basketball team. And he was like, okay, whatever. And so all through, high school, I talked about how I wanted to go to Duke. And then when I was running Eric Winalda's campaign for president of U.S. Soccer, we went into North Carolina for an adult tournament, as Big Carolina Cup. And so there was like teams from all parts of the country, but mainly from North and South Carolina that had come in for this tournament. So we went in for this event, and I I knew we were going to be done, Sunday night. So he had the first flight out back to LA on Monday morning, and I didn't have anywhere I had to be on Monday. So I took the last flight out on Monday and stayed around and basically went and just hung out on Duke's campus for like 6 hours and snuck in the gym and met John Shire, and they were getting ready to do practice, and then they kicked me out. But walked around the campus. I called my dad just while I was there and said, "Dad, you're welcome." And my dad was like, "What are you talking about?" He knew I was at the Duke campus, like just hanging out. I said, "You're welcome." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "If I had come to the campus when I was in high school, you would be broke right now. You would have no money because I would have made you somehow figure out a way to get me here." But that rivalry is such a good rivalry in all the sports, not just basketball, soccer, lacrosse. Football. I mean, you know it, you lived it. So you go and you play in North Carolina, which is, the premier soccer experience in college for a player, and then get the opportunity to continue playing. At what point in all of this time, your upbringing, growing up in northern Jersey, getting the opportunity to play at the University of North Carolina, and then playing professionally, did you go, you know what, it's time for me to try to help the next generation figure out player development?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. And I don't know if there was ever a single moment where I thought that. I think for me, it was kind of a natural transition into doing something that was my initial really strong connection with the game. And what I mean by that is I was playing in Sweden a few years into my professional career, and it was very lonely. I was just there to play on the team. I didn't have friends or family, really. There were a couple other Americans there with me. But for the most part, after training every day, I was just on my own in Gothenburg, Sweden, to do whatever. So I did what I had done my whole life. I would take my ball out and kick it against the little wall of a flower patch, or try a juggling trick, or use different surfaces to juggle. And just it was so comforting for me. And then one time I thought, oh, let me just film this. It was, this is embarrassing, but people weren't just easily posting videos all over the internet and stuff. So I filmed it, I think on my phone, and then I uploaded it to YouTube, and I put it out there, and I called it a backyard skill challenge, because I was thinking, these were the things I did in my backyard. Like, somebody challenged me initially to do 10 juggles, and I was out there for hours, frustrated, throwing the ball, and then I would try again and again and again. And finally I got those 10 juggles, and it was like the most exciting thing ever. So I thought, you know what, let me see who else out there wants to try these challenges. And it really caught on, and it was a fun way for me to connect with people from literally all over the world who shared this common passion that I had felt my whole life. It's like, no matter what's going on in your life, whether you're down, lonely, doing well in your career, not well, I would always have my music on, and I'd be able to go out and kick the ball around. And that was like the thing that made me feel centered. It's almost like my meditation. So initially it started as just sharing that feeling and that connection I had with the ball. And that is something that will last me long past my playing career, whether I was on the national team or not, or whatever was going on. It was just, that was so consistent for me. So I think for me, the big thing is sharing that experience with others. And the way I see it, when I look at youth development in this country, and there's a lot of talk now on, are the numbers not increasing, or their drop off, especially on the girls' side? And to me, it's because soccer in our country is another activity that kids do. They get dropped off at tutoring, gymnastics, soccer. They go to do their, whatever it is that they're doing. It's just another thing on the schedule for a lot of families, or it's something that kids initially take some interest in, and then parents are really propelling forward because they want their kids to get a college scholarship and all that. And that is not at all what the game was for me. The game is the way that I've expressed myself most throughout my life. And it's honestly, it's empowered me to be who I am and to teach me so much about who I am. So the way I think of it is that if players develop an individual relationship with the ball, or an individual relationship with the game, that could even mean supporting a team and supporting a club, but just loving the game outside of it being the activity they show up at a few times a week because their parents drop them off there, that's where I think we will change the soccer culture in our country, and we'll change the whole development path. But right now, we have so many people who are just doing it as another thing they do, or being kind of just are on this path and showing up every day, but I don't think they've actually chosen to do it for themselves. And for me, it was something that I really felt I chose to do for myself, and I continue to choose to do for myself. So sharing these training ideas and even thinking about youth development for me was a really natural transition, because I just thought of it as what inspired me and what has been such an amazing tool and motivator throughout my entire life that constantly centers me and grounds me and has given me my confidence, allowed me to overcome obstacles and feel on top of the world and all of those things. And can I somehow foster that experience for other people out there? So that really now I'm able to kind of think about it and articulate it. But for a long time, I was kind of just doing that by default, because I felt how excited I was when my first coach, Ashley, showed me how to do juggling and what juggling was, and that I could try to keep track and get up to 10. And that literally was a turning point in my entire life, because that taught me, okay, you set a goal for yourself and you go out, and it may take a lot of frustration, a lot of practice, but if you stick with it, you can accomplish that goal, and then you can set the next goal. And so, I mean, it sounds silly, but juggling has literally been such a good metaphor for me in life in general, in terms of what it takes to set goals and to methodically go out and work to achieve them, and how exciting and empowering that is, and how it can change who you are as a person. So for me, youth development is actually about developing these people who have this connection with the game, rather than a set of skills or a certain ability to make a certain team or get a college scholarship.
When we look at the landscape, this is more of a macro question. The youth soccer space is a $5 billion plus per year business. In terms of a sports economy, it's larger than the German Bundesliga in business. It's insane. Like I just don't think people even recognize this. But with all that money in the space in American youth soccer, do you think that is contributing to this lack of joy, feeling of pressure, chasing of scholarship, that the macro aspects of this, that basically, I often say about youth sports, the biggest problem with youth sports are the adults. And we always find a way to mess it up for the kids. Do you find that is part of this aspect of kids not having that joy and feeling that pressure at 8, 9, 10 years old because of just the way the system is primarily run right now?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say, like, to really pinpoint the effect that the economic part has on it. But I certainly think that in a lot of ways, our system is kind of flipped on its head. And meaning, there's so much money in it, like you said, but at the same time, not everyone has access, and the people who can't afford it are left out, which you think, if there's such a strong economy surrounding it, and there are so many families involved in the game are incredibly affluent, yet there are kids who may be extremely talented or really love soccer who actually are not able to participate in the same programming. So in some ways, we have such amazing resources for some, and then no resources for others. And at the same time, too, I think that a lot of the money is going into strange things, in my opinion, and creating this competition between clubs and leagues, and even between pro clubs and youth clubs. And that's not where the competition should be taking place. The competition should be taking place among the players to prove themselves and be seen by those elite clubs. So we have a lot of people thinking they're elite because there's a lot of money involved, and because they travel to tournaments that are far away, and they stay in nice hotels, and they have awesome uniforms and great equipment, and they wear heart rate monitors when they play and get their data tracked. But elite, to me, has to do with the mindset of the player and the player's desire. So there may be a lot of elite players not involved in that. So I think the economics surrounding the game in our country have really complicated what would be a more ideal player pathway development-wise. And I think there needs to be work done on this to look at it and say, okay, well, this is a huge industry, but how are we using that, and why is it competitive in the wrong ways maybe, and why can't we repurpose some of that to make certain programming free or really affordable to allow the proper players to be identified. So I think it's a wonderful thing that there is so much money and interest involved, but somehow it needs to be repurposed, I think, and focused properly to make sure that we're creating the proper experience at all levels, which may mean less of the pressure and less of the talk of college scholarships and stuff like that at an early age, and even more of it and more of the focus and more of those resources put towards the very serious players in an older age.
That makes complete sense, and I agree with you. I just look at our landscape, and for as big of a country we are, that is both a blessing and a curse. And I think sometimes it's been used as an excuse by the federation, specifically to say, well, we can't solve these problems because they're just too big. And my brain's not programmed that way. It's all, my brain's programmed to always like figure it out. Like, what is the solution? How can we get there? What can we do? Maybe it's not perfect, but can we get it better? And so, I think that's often thrown out. And I think a lot of times when we look at the youth space specifically, you'll hear all of this resignation and talk about, well, I mean, there's nothing we can do. It just, the genie's out of the bottle. And I'm just like, we have the money and the interest is there. It's, what are we doing with it? How are we redirecting it? What channels are we allowing that to flow through? I mean, if you think of money in a neutral standpoint, think of it like a river, and it's just flowing. And you can basically build a channel off of the river and divert some of that waterway or the entire waterway into a different direction. And that's how money works. And so this idea that it can only flow in this one way, that the way it's flowing now, to me, is crazy. And so, finding a different way to approach that with our kids, I think is so important, because I do see that. I see kids, who have great potential. They're talented players, and just the way the system is, for whatever reason, they go away. They quit playing. Some is, for money. I mean, I used to run a non-pay to play. It was a free to play youth club, and it was very small. It's like a single squad, but in that squad, we had kids that were not in the system. So it wasn't like, let's go, create something and try to pull kids out of another academy. It was like, let's go try to figure out to do some programming for kids that aren't playing. And so the majority of our kids were not playing organized soccer when we started this project. And, it really opened my eyes to like some of the issues, and it goes beyond money. It went into like parents' work schedule and time. So we were having to provide transportation. There's a lot of things that go into like, how do we provide more access and opportunity? I think a lot of people will just go, well, we can just give a scholarship. Well, are you going to give them a ride too? I mean, like, it's, you know what I'm saying?
I think that's such a good point. It's accessibility, because it's also a cultural thing. Like, a scholarship to participate is one thing, but like you said, it's about getting there. It's about, if the team travels to tournaments, their hotel costs, everyone's going with their family. Well, where does the player stay whose family can't afford to travel with them, and they can't get their own hotel room? So there's a lot of reasons that somebody would not feel welcome or comfortable outside of just the cost. And even things like, you travel with a group and they're all getting dressed up to go out to dinner, and they have all these nice clothes, and you don't fit in. And there's so many things in our soccer culture that exclude a group of people, and it is so much more complicated than simply the cost, I think, of participation.
Completely. So tell us about Techna football. What are you hoping to do with that in terms of impact on development and helping the next generation become better soccer players, more in love with the game, etc.?
Yeah, so it really all started when I was talking about, being in Sweden and putting these few videos on YouTube. I started to connect with the soccer world through sharing training ideas and things that players can do with the ball in very minimal space with creative type of equipment. You don't need to go out and buy anything or have access to a full bag of beautiful soccer balls and a goal and a grass field. You can go in a driveway or an alley somewhere and get better, which has been my personal experience. So after a while, I realized, I wanted to give players something a little bit more concrete, an actual blueprint to follow rather than just all of these ideas put out on YouTube. Because, you go on YouTube or Instagram or whatever and you search and there are just, there's freestyle and trick shots and all kinds of training ideas. But what do you actually do? If you want to go out and do a training session, like which of those things do you pick from? It's hard, I think, for players to know what to actually do. So what Technique Football is it is a blueprint with actual training progressions for players where it takes them through a session as if I was there with them as an individual coach. So there's a short demo video, a little written description, and they press go to time themselves for the drill. And then they can come back, and in some of them you can record a score, and it kind of instructs you as to how to track your improvement. So the app provides the blueprint and the training session, as well as ways for players to track their scores and certain things, to track improvement, but also how much time they've spent working on their own. Because my whole thing is, you don't need to go out for 2 hours with the ball on your own. That's extreme. 10, 15 minutes every day. I did a little math the other day, and I counted up, if you just spend 10 minutes a day, which is almost nothing, everyone has 10 minutes extra every day, for an entire year, that's over 60 hours of extra work. So if you were to do that in the app, the app would actually show you at the end of the year, wow, you've done over 60 hours. So you can see that time accruing. So it allows players the ideas in terms of what to do, but also the tracking and the understanding of this process, and that it adds up over time. And then also there's a competitive element where they can compete on leaderboards with players from all over the world who are also doing the same training. So it creates the community. But really, the overall picture of this, and this is a really long-term vision for me. It's something I want to, I'm working every day to continue to develop and grow, is that I want this to be a resource that helps to foster that individual relationship with the ball in the game. Because I truly believe that whether these players become pro players and have long pro careers, or just continue to play for fun, or do this to help make their high school team, or maybe to help them get into a college or go play college soccer, whatever it is, if you have that individual relationship with the ball in the game, and you've done it yourself, not because your parent made you or not because you were supposed to, quote unquote, but because you went out with your ball to your driveway, to the alley on your own and did this, that will be a lasting thing. And that these will be players who stay in the game and love the game for what it is, well past whether they, have a playing career on the field or not, well past that time, this will be lasting. So that's kind of the gist of what Technique Football is, but also kind of the larger picture of what I think it could become in our soccer landscape.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're, the thought behind, the intentionality behind the whole project, and the way that you process and look to make an impact on the culture is, I think a lot of times when you get into business, everybody's thinking dollars and cents and whatever. And you're, to me, that's kind of that next level thinking. How can what we do provide a better platform and better opportunity for our customers, or in this case, the players, to develop, to love the game, etc. So I really, really like the way that you're approaching that. I want to ask you one final question before we go, and it's a question. A variation of a question that I ask a lot of our guests, and that question is this: if you were in charge of American soccer for a day, you could do anything while you were in charge. You have supreme power to wave a magic wand and right any wrong or any wrongs, whatever, with your day in charge. What would you do with that day in power?
Oh wow. Well, here's what came to my mind first, and this has been on my mind because I don't know if you saw this or if anyone listening saw the Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel episode on how Norway handles their youth sports. By any chance, did you see it?
I have not seen that episode yet. I will go and watch it, though, now that you have.
Yeah, well, I recommend people watch it, because what I would try to do is mimic what they've done. And what they've done essentially is they have kept youth sports up until 12 years old, so much later than we do, all about fun and really limited competition. They don't do any rankings. Nobody travels to play on more elite teams than others. It's all about participation. And then after 12, what they do is they have the athletes themselves dictate if they would like to then get into serious training. And I think that model, although it's so against what we do here, I mean, it couldn't be more opposite than how we treat things here, to be honest. It's almost like completely reversed. I would totally flip what we're doing here and have it mirror that a lot more. So all about fun and inclusion and participation all the way up to 12. And then after that, it would be based on the player's decision on if they want to get into serious training. And then we would ramp up the intensity and what we ask of those athletes into the teenage years and young adulthood to make it a lot more serious even, and even more pressure and more competitive than it is now. So I think I would have it be a lot less competitive at the younger ages and a lot more competitive at the older ages and all the way through the pro ranks. I think we can make it even more competitive and even more cutthroat at the top and even more inclusive at the bottom.
I love that answer.
So I don't have a specific way of how I would do it within the day, but I'm sure a day is enough to accomplish that, right?
Yes, I'm sure. Well, knowing you, what you would do is you would have a plan. So the moment you had that power, you'd be like, okay, let's put the plan in place.
I would work for 24 hours straight around the clock.
Exactly. So I want to ask you a quick question about your answer before we go here. At the older ages, more competitive, even into the pro ranks, I'm paraphrasing your response. What does that mean compared to what you see now, and what would you like it to be if you had this set up in place?
Yeah, so I think that we use the term elite very loosely now. A lot of players think they're elite because they play in elite style environments, and I think that we should have a lot more clarity surrounding that in terms of letting players know honestly where they stand, not finality. I really have a problem with when players are told you will never make it because you're too small, you're too this, you're too that. No, that's not our decision in terms of fostering development. Our decision is to tell players where they stand right now. So when I say more elite, I mean not fooling anyone to think that they're an elite player just because they play for a top club, and being honest about where they stand. Well, no, you right now on the path you're on are not going to make it because you're not training on your own and doing extra. You're not, you might not be that strong or fast, but it's not because of that. It's because you're not doing extra in the weight room and working with an expert to work on those things. So I think it's more about being really honest and blunt with people about when they say they have a goal or a vision. Okay, well, you're not doing any of the things necessary to get there. And I've experienced this firsthand so many times. The number of kids who think they want to be professional players or play college soccer, and what they're doing is just totally not in line with it. So I think that after a certain age, there needs to be way more clarity surrounding, well, what does it actually look like to be a professional player, if that's what you say your goal is? And if you're not doing something that looks in line with that, you need to know. So I think, being more selective with how we use the term elite and being more honest with athletes about what trajectory they're on and what trajectory is necessary to actually accomplish what they say their goals are.
That makes sense, and I'm glad that you made that clarification. I really appreciate the sincerity of your answer, and I am very supportive of your one day in charge. It is always fun to hear the answers. They're all over the place, but they're usually really, really good answers. And for me, the one thing I get out of all of these answers is the fact that we have a lot of issues and a lot of ways that we can begin to fix them. There's not one magic pill that wipes out every wrong and fixes everything to make everything right, but there are a lot of things we could do to make things better. So I appreciate you taking some time to answer that question and taking time to come on the show today. We really do appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your pathway, your history, as well as your ideas for how we can make kids fall in love with the game and get better at this game, this beautiful game that's going on. Do you have a favorite to win the World Cup as we head to break?
Oh, I mean, I think you can't say the U.S. is not your favorite if you're being honest about it. But I think that it's really interesting because every game, sorry, I'll make this real quick, but every game I watch, I feel like clarifies the pool of teams even more for me. So it'll be really interesting to see the next round of games for everyone. Like we saw France again, an obvious second favorite. So I get a little more information on them and kind of where they stand. And so, I mean, I think U.S. and France are, to me, the top two teams I've seen so far pretty clearly, but continuing to learn about them all. And if someone out there listening has not been watching, you're missing out because it's been so exciting to me.
It has been amazing, completely. And not in this World Cup, but I'm telling you, over the next 10 years, watch out for the Spanish women's national team. They are about to be on a run in the next 10 years that are going to be hard to stop. Mark my words. They're coming.
Yeah.
But I'm with you on this World Cup. I think it's the U.S. and France are the two big favorites, and we'll see how it plays out. So, thanks, Yael, for coming on the show. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I could talk about this for hours. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely,
we ask the questions.
Absolutely, we will have you back on again soon in the near future. Thanks for coming on today. That is Yael Averbush West. I'd like to thank her for coming on the show today. Our sponsor this half hour is Charity Water. You can learn more about Charity Water by going to charitywater.org. We will be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. You could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Welcome back into the show. Thanks for tuning in this Thursday morning, June the 13th. The Premier League released their schedules, and opening weekend we get a fun matchup for those of us who are neutrals. Manchester United and Chelsea kick off the opening weekend. That's Sunday, August the 11th. You can find that schedule online to see where your club is playing that opening weekend if you have a favorite Premier League club, or check out their entire fixture schedule as well. But that'll be an exciting matchup to kick off the Premier League season. That opening weekend, Liverpool will get things started on Friday against Norwich City, and then Manchester City will be playing West Ham United on Saturday, August 10th, and you can find the total list of matchups. But the big headliner that weekend is Manchester United and Chelsea coming up. So, it's off season, but it doesn't last very long because we're about to start seeing a bunch of player transfers. We have the Women's World Cup going on this summer, which is fantastic. Copa America. And you have all these different tournaments going on that are good. When you look at the landscape of soccer, it's a serious business, and it never ends, and it's always running. And I think if we can ever figure out a way to tap our potential and make what we do better and reach the global standard, I think that we're going to eventually be able to see on all levels and in all ways the ability to be the best soccer country on earth. I truly believe it. I work for it every day. And I thank you for tuning in each and every day, weekdays, live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on DanielWorkman.com. I'd like to thank Yael Averbush West for coming on today and sharing her thoughts and her ideas. It's been a really good week, and I've really enjoyed the conversations as we've gone down different aspects of women's soccer and these ladies and their personal pathways. Every story's been unique and different, and it's not an accident. It's the case for everybody. We all have a little bit of a different story, and it's great being able to share that with all of you. So thanks for tuning in. We will see everybody again tomorrow.